I was standing in line at a small coffee shop downtown, half listening to the hum of conversations around me, when my phone began to vibrate. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant sales pitches, surveys, or some automated voice telling me about extended car warranties no one asked for. But something, an instinct I can't fully explain even now, made me pick up the call. Ms. Luachik, this is Harold Wexler from United Bank. You're listed as the primary contact for your father's financial account. We're calling regarding an urgent matter. For a moment, I couldn't process the words. Primary contact? Urgent matter? I looked around, disoriented, as if someone in the cafe might step forward and explain why in the world a bank would call me about my father. They never called me. They never needed to. Because for as long as I could remember, Brandon handled everything. The bank, the company, the bills, the taxes, even the holiday dinners. It had been that way since we were kids. Brandon was the firstborn, the golden boy, the pride of the Luachik family. He was the varsity athlete, the one who could fix anything, from a broken faucet to our father's temper with a single impressive achievement. Where I saw problems, Brandon saw opportunities. Where I hesitated, he moved. Where I tried to be careful, he dazzled. And everyone loved him for it, especially my father, who seemed to believe that Brandon had been born specifically to inherit everything he built. And me? I was the quiet one. The one with the books and the questions and the opinions no one asked for. Growing up in the shadow of someone like Brandon teaches you quickly. You can be good, you can even be better, but you will never be enough. And yet, here I was, phone pressed to my ear, being asked to handle something that should have been conveniently routed to him. I think you meant to call my brother, I said finally, forcing a polite tone. He takes care of my father's financial matters. He always has. The man cleared his throat. Paper rustled on his end, as if he were reviewing something. Ms. Luachik, the number we have on file for Mr. Brandon Luachik is invalid. Disconnected. And according to our records, you, not he, are listed as the primary emergency contact on your father's credit and collateral documents. I blinked. What documents? What collateral? What was going on? I stepped out of line, ignoring the impatient sigh of the man behind me. My coffee could wait. Whatever this was, couldn't. Sir, I said slowly, I'm not aware of any financial issues. My father has never mentioned. It is an extremely urgent matter. Several payments are currently overdue. We've attempted to notify your brother for weeks. Since we cannot reach him, it's critical we speak with you now. My fingers tightened around the phone. Weeks? They'd been trying for weeks. A cold unease slid into my stomach. An unease I hadn't felt since the last time my father had fallen ill, and the responsibility of his care had hung over the house like a storm cloud. I don't understand, I whispered. Is my father in trouble? There was silence before the man finally replied. Ms. Luachik, your father may lose his home if this matter is not addressed immediately. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember the streets, or the traffic, or the lights that kept turning red no matter how hard I pressed the gas pedal. I only remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached, replaying the conversation again and again. My father? Lose his home? How was that possible when Brandon controlled everything? I thought of the last time I'd seen my brother, impeccably dressed, confident as always, stepping out of his sleek black Range Rover like he owned the world. He had flashed me that trademark grin, the one that charmed investors and soothed our father's worries with equal effectiveness. Don't stress about Dad's paperwork, Lex, he had said. I've got it under control. That was Brandon's phrase. I've got it under control. It was his shield, his mantra, his justification for pushing me out of every family decision. And our father, worn down by age and illness, accepted it, trusted it, relied on it. I had too, maybe foolishly. But that phone call told me one thing with chilling clarity. Nothing was under control. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were shaking. I dropped my keys twice before finally managing to get them into the lock. My phone buzzed again just as I stepped inside. A voicemail from the bank. I pressed play with trembling fingers. Ms. Luachik, this is United Bank again. Please call us back as soon as possible. Your father's collateralized loan is now officially past the grace period, and foreclosure proceedings may begin. This situation is extremely time-sensitive. We urge you to act immediately. Collateralized loan? Foreclosure? There was no universe in which my father, conservative, financially disciplined, terrified of debt, would take a loan against his home without telling anyone. Unless he hadn't taken it at all. Unless someone else had. Unless... My breath caught. No, Brandon wouldn't do that. He couldn't. Could he? I called my brother first. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. By the fifth attempt, my voice was shaking. Brandon, call me back the moment you get this. It's urgent. It's about Dad. The bank called. They said... I stopped myself. No point leaving everything on voicemail. Just call me, please. I hung up and sank onto the arm of the couch. The apartment was too quiet, too still. Every sound felt magnified. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint tapping of tree branches against the window, the thud of my own heartbeat pounding against my ribs like a fist. I scrolled through my contacts until I reached Dad. Home. He picked up on the second ring. Lex? His voice was thin, raspy, tired. Everything all right? I swallowed hard. Dad, did you take out a loan recently? There was a beat of silence. A loan? He sounded confused. Of course not. Why would I? So you didn't sign anything with United Bank? No, I haven't dealt with them in years. Brandon takes care of everything. My throat tightened. Dad, they're calling me, not him. I heard the shift in his breathing, the beginning of fear. What do you mean? They said your house might go into foreclosure. Foreclosure? He coughed, startled. That's impossible. Brandon pays the bills. He told me everything is handled. He told me... He stopped mid-sentence, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Alexis, what exactly did they say? I repeated the bank's words as steadily as I could. By the time I finished, my father wasn't speaking at all. Not a whisper, not a breath. Dad? Finally, he inhaled sharply. I don't understand, he murmured. Why would they call you? Why not your brother? There it was again. The question I couldn't answer. Because even if Brandon had changed numbers, even if he'd forgotten to update something, even if he'd made a mistake, why was I, the daughter who'd always been kept away from the finances, listed as the primary contact? There was only one explanation that made even remote sense, though it chilled me to consider it. Someone had written my name on those documents on purpose. And it definitely wasn't my father. Lex, my father whispered shakily. I'm scared. I closed my eyes. I know. I'll fix it. You don't even know what's happening, he said. Maybe you should wait for Brandon. No, I cut him off. I won't wait for him anymore. The silence on the line said everything. He knew, even if he didn't want to admit it. He knew something was wrong with Brandon. Something he'd been ignoring. Something he'd been hoping would resolve itself. But now there were consequences. Consequences big enough that the bank was calling me. Consequences big enough to threaten everything my father owned. And consequences big enough to wake something in me I hadn't felt in years. The determination to stop being invisible. I hung up and stood in the middle of my dim living room. The city lights outside flickered against the windows. And slowly, very slowly, a thought crystallized. Sharp, painful, impossible to ignore. What if Brandon wasn't the hero of our family? What if he was the reason everything was falling apart? I didn't have answers. But I knew two things with absolute certainty. The bank wasn't calling the wrong person. And my brother was hiding something. Something big. Something dangerous. Something that was about to turn our entire family upside down. And whether I was ready or not, I was the only one left to uncover the truth. The first thing I did after hanging up with my father was call the bank back. My hands were still trembling, but my voice sounded strangely calm, like it belonged to someone else. Someone who knew what they were doing. Someone who wasn't just the daughter they'd always kept out of the room when real decisions were made. United Bank, this is Melissa. How can I direct your call? This is Alexis Luachik, I said. You called me about my father's account. They mentioned foreclosure. There was a pause, the polite rustling of papers, the clicking of a keyboard. Yes, Ms. Luachik. One moment while I pull that up. All right, yes. We've been trying to reach your family for several weeks. By family, you mean my brother, I said, surprising myself with the sharpness in my tone. She hesitated. The primary operator listed on the loan is Mr. Brandon Luachik. But the emergency and secondary contact for all alerts is you. The words settled heavily between us. Can you explain exactly what this loan is? I asked. Because my father says he never took one. Melissa took a breath, and her voice shifted into the precise, rehearsed cadence of someone reading from a screen. It's a collateralized personal business loan issued 18 months ago, secured against the property at 417 Maple Ridge, your father's home, and several other listed assets. The initial principal was, she paused, $450,000. The number punched the air out of my lungs. $450,000. I sank down onto the couch. My father would never agree to that, I whispered. He hates debt. He made us pay cash for our first cars just to teach us responsibility. He still pays utility bills in person when he can. I can only tell you what's in front of me, ma'am, she said gently. The loan was approved, signed, and disbursed. Payments were made on time for the first year. Then they started arriving late. Then partially. For the last 4 months, no payments have been received at all. 4 months, I repeated numbly. 4 months of missed payments. 4 months where the bank kept calling Brandon. 4 months where he said nothing to us. Can you send me copies of the documents? I asked. The original application, the signatures, all of it. I'll need to verify your identity first, she said. Can you confirm your date of birth? Your Social Security's last 4 digits? And your relationship to Mr. Gregory Luachik? I answered each question with mechanical precision. There was another pause. Then the clicking resumed. All right, Mrs. Luachik. I've emailed the documents to the address on file. Is that still correct? I stared at my laptop across the room, suddenly feeling as if I were looking at a bomb I'd just armed. Yes, I said. That's correct. Please be aware, Melissa continued, that this loan is now in serious delinquency. If arrangements aren't made within the next 30 days, foreclosure proceedings will accelerate. I can transfer you to our loss mitigation department if you'd like to discuss options. Options. That word sounded cruel in that moment. What options did we have if the entire situation was based on something my father swore he hadn't done? Not yet, I said quietly. First, I need to see what my brother signed. The email came through before I even hung up. Subject line, Loan Documents, Gregory and Brandon Luachik. I opened my laptop with a slow, deliberate awareness of a surgeon about to cut into something that might not survive the operation. The PDF filled the screen. Dozens of pages. Legal language, clusters of numbers, interest rates that made my eyes sting. I scrolled. On page 3, I saw it. My father's name. My brother's name. And at the bottom, 2 signatures. One of them was my father's familiar, careful cursive. Gregory L. Luachik, each letter precise as if he were still signing checks in front of a bank teller who might judge the neatness of his penmanship. The other... I stared at Brandon's signature. It was bold, confident, slashed across the page in the same arrogant flourish he used on contracts, cocktail napkins, birthday cards. An assertion of presence. I was here. I agreed. I own this. There was a third section, too. Fine print that named the emergency contact and secondary responsible party to receive all notices, warnings, and critical updates if the primary contact could not be reached. There, in neat type, was my name, Alexis Marie Luacek. And underneath, a signature that looked like mine. Except it wasn't. Not really. My signature had a small loop on the A I'd been drawing since high school. This one didn't. The M in Marie was too tight. The K at the end of Luacek was wrong. My hand always made it just a bit taller than the I. This one looked like someone trying to remember how I signed my name from a distance. Someone who thought a rough imitation would be enough. I zoomed in. The line of ink wavered slightly as if whoever had signed it had done so too quickly. Or too carelessly. Brandon, I whispered. What did you do? I scrolled through more pages. There were income statements, asset declarations, a projected business plan that on paper looked impressive, expansion of my father's small logistics company into a regional operation, new trucks, new contracts, new offices, projected revenue curves that only went up, projected debt that would self-liquidate within 3 years due to anticipated market growth and contract diversification. It was like watching someone describe a bright, glittering future that had never existed. A future Brandon had sold. To the bank, to my father, maybe even to himself. But somewhere between those glossy projections and this moment, the future had crashed into reality. And now, my father's house was on the line. Because of a loan he insisted he never agreed to. Because of signatures I no longer trusted. Because of a brother who kept repeating the same 2 words. I've got it under control. I forwarded the documents to my own email, then printed them. The printer hummed and spat out pages that felt heavier than they had any right to be. I stacked them carefully, watching the pile grow thicker and thicker. By the time the last page slid out, I had a stack of paper almost an inch high. An inch of lies. An inch of betrayal. An inch of the distance between the father I knew and the son he thought he could trust. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Brandon. Finally. I stared at his name lighting up the screen. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I swiped to answer. Brandon. Lex, he said, sounding cheerful, almost carefree. Wow, 5 missed calls. You trying to set a world record or something? My grip tightened around the phone. The bank called me, I said. About Dad's loan. About the foreclosure. There was a pause. A tiny, almost imperceptible hitch in his breath. Then his voice smoothed out. Oh, that, he said. Yeah, they've been annoying lately. It's nothing. 4 months of missed payments is nothing? He laughed, light and dismissive. You know how banks are. They always talk like the world is ending. It's just a temporary cash flow issue. I told them I'd handle it. You told them that, I said slowly. But you didn't answer their calls. I've been busy, he snapped. Then, recovering, he added, Look, Lex, I appreciate your concern, but I don't need you panicking, Dad. I've got this under control. There it was. The phrase. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat. They sent me the documents, I said. I saw Dad's signature, I saw yours, and I saw mine. Silence. Longer this time. You're listed as my emergency contact, I continued. You put my name down as the person they'd call if you disappeared. You signed my name, Brandon. Or had someone sign it. Which one was it? He exhaled sharply through his nose, a sound I knew well. Irritation. Jesus, Lex. Are we really doing this? You think I forged your signature? For what? To make you feel important. For when things went wrong, I said. So someone else would catch the fallout. You're being dramatic. I'm being observant. I walked to the window and stared out at the city. my reflection faintly mirrored in the glass. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, jaw hard, shoulders squared, eyes cold. Dad doesn't know, I said quietly. He had no idea about the loan or the foreclosure. He's old, Brandon replied. He forgets things. He might be older, I said, but he still remembers signing his own name. And he says he didn't sign for this. He's confused, Brandon insisted. He's been forgetting a lot lately. You would know that if you actually spent more time at the house. There it was. The guilt. The angle. You don't get to use his age as a shield for your bad decisions, I said. Not with me. He sighed dramatically. Look, Lex, this is business. Sometimes you take risks. Sometimes timing doesn't pan out. I've been juggling a few things, and yeah, maybe I dropped a ball or two, but I'm working on it. I have a plan. And in your plan, I asked, does Dad get to keep his house? A bead. Of course he does. You're sure about that? Yes. Because the bank doesn't sound sure. Brandon's tone sharpened. What exactly did you say to them? Enough to know that if we don't do something now, they'll take everything, I said. And enough to know they legally have the right to talk to me. Because, like it or not, I'm on the paperwork. I put you there to protect the family, he said hotly. To make sure someone responsible would be contacted if something went wrong. You're welcome, by the way. I almost laughed. Is that what this is? Your version of a compliment? He didn't answer. I'm coming by the house tomorrow, I said. We're going to sit down at the dining room table like adults. And we're going to go through every single page, every loan, every transfer, every ball you dropped. Dad deserves to know what's going on. There was a long pause. I don't think that's necessary, Brandon said finally. You'll just confuse him. And you'll overreact. I'm already overreacting, I said. And I'm already involved. The moment you signed my name, you made sure of that. His voice dropped. You're making a mistake, Lex. Maybe I was, but not the way he meant. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, and ended the call. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant echo of traffic and the occasional siren cutting through the dark. My mind replayed the conversation with Brandon, line by line, tone by tone. He sounded just like he always had. Confident, dismissing, in control. Except now I heard something else behind it. Not certainty. Fear. By the time dawn finally began to seep through the curtains, I'd made up my mind. Whatever Brandon was hiding, I was going to find it. Not to humiliate him. Not to hurt him, but because my father deserved the truth. And honestly, so did I. The next afternoon, I pulled up in front of the house I'd grown up in. 417. Maple Ridge. From the outside, it looked almost the same as it always had. White siding, blue shutters, small porch with 2 chairs that had faded from navy to a tired gray over the years. Except now the lawn was longer than I'd ever seen it. Weeds sprouted through cracks in the driveway. The mailbox leaned to one side like it had given up standing straight. I parked and stepped out, the cool air brushing across my face. There were envelopes stuffed in the mailbox. Too many. I pulled them out and flipped through. Bills, notices. A few envelopes with urgent printed in red. I swallowed and tucked them under my arm. The door opened before I could knock. My father stood there wearing the same cardigan he'd had for a decade. It hung looser on him now. There were more lines on his face, more gray in his hair. Lex, he said, and his expression softened with relief. You're here. His eyes dropped to the pile of envelopes in my arms, and I watched his jaw tighten. They've been coming for weeks, he said. Brandon said he would handle it. He told me not to worry. I met his gaze. Does he handle things a lot by telling you not to worry? I asked. He gave a small, weary smile. That's his way. Your brother always wanted to keep the hard parts off my shoulders. said I'd done enough building the company, that it was his turn. I stepped inside and looked around. The house felt smaller. Not physically, but emotionally, as if the walls had pulled inward under the weight of stress and unanswered questions. A stack of unpaid bills lay on the hall table. Dust had settled on picture frames. In the kitchen, a light flickered weakly above the sink. It didn't feel like the house of a man who had everything under control. "Where is he?" I asked. "Your brother?" My father hesitated. He said he might be late, had some meeting, or something. He waved a hand vaguely. "You know how busy he is?" Yes, I thought. Busy not answering his phone. Busy not paying the loan he took. Busy not being here. I set the envelopes down on the dining table and pulled out the stack of printed documents from my bag. "Dad," I said softly, "I need you to look at something with me." Oh, he stared at the papers like they were a verdict waiting to be read. "What is it?" he asked. "Proof," I said, "of what Brandon's been doing, and of what he's dragged you into." His shoulders sagged. "Well," he murmured, "I suppose it's time I stopped taking his word for everything." I glanced at him. He looked older than he had yesterday, but he also looked clearer, like he was waking up from a long sleep. I spread the pages out on the table. The signatures, the loan terms, the missed payments. He picked up the first page, his eyes moving slowly over the lines. When he reached his own signature, he frowned. "I remember signing something," he said. "There was a day Brandon brought over some papers, said they were just updates. Standard restructuring. Nothing major." I was tired. There was a lot to read. He said, "Don't worry, Dad. It's just formalities." He traced a finger over the ink. I thought it was about the company, not the house. "What did he tell you exactly?" I asked. "That we'd use the assets to leverage growth. That it was smart. That everyone did it." I said I didn't like loans. He laughed. My father's jaw clenched. He said I was old school. "Did he ever explain how much he was borrowing?" I pressed. He shook his head slowly. "I trusted him," he said. "He's my son." For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, the weight of that sentence hanging in the air like smoke. "He's my son." As if those words alone should have been enough to make everything safe. As if blood had ever been a guarantee of honesty. As if family couldn't be the ones who hurt you most. It would be easy to say that was the moment I started hating my brother. But hatred is too simple. Too clean. What I felt was more complicated. A hollow ache. A rising anger. A cold, focused clarity. Looking at those papers, at my father's tired eyes, at the neglected house he might lose because of a signature he didn't understand. I realized something. Brandon hadn't just failed. He hadn't just made a risky decision that went wrong. He had gambled with someone else's life. And he did it while smiling, while reassuring, while saying he was protecting us. I gathered the documents back into a stack. "Dad," I said quietly, "this isn't just bad business. This might be fraud." He blinked. "Fraud?" he repeated, as if the word didn't fit in our house, in our family, in his understanding of his son. "Yes," I said. "If he signed things you didn't understand, if he misrepresented where the money was going, if he forged my signature, that's not just a mistake. That's criminal." My father sank into a chair. "I never wanted this," he whispered. "I just wanted you both to be all right, to have more than I had." I rested a hand on the back of his chair. "You gave us everything you could," I said. "What we do with that is on us." He stared at the papers again. "What are you going to do, Alexis?" he asked. I took a breath. Once that question would have made me shrink, defer, wait for someone else to answer. Now it felt different. "I'm going to find out where the money went," I said. "I'm going to talk to the bank. I'm going to talk to a lawyer. and I'm going to make sure Brandon never has the chance to do this to you again. My father looked up at me, a long, searching look. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before when he looked at me. Not affection, not worry, respect. "All right," he said hoarsely. "Then I'll stand with you." I nodded, feeling the last trace of hesitation burn away. Because somewhere between the bank's call, the forged signature, the unpaid bills, and my father's quiet heartbreak, something inside me had changed. I was done being the invisible daughter. I was done standing in the background while Brandon scorched the ground under all of us. That day at the dining table, surrounded by paper and silence and the wreckage of Brandon's choices, I made a decision. I wasn't going to save my brother. I was going to save my father. And if that meant tearing down everything Brandon had built on lies, so be it. I didn't expect Brandon to actually show up that night. My father didn't either. For years, Brandon had lived in a different orbit, one where family dinners were optional, responsibilities were negotiable, and consequences were something that happened to other people. So, when his black Range Rover finally pulled into the driveway, 30 minutes after sunset, 2 hours after he said he'd arrive, I felt my stomach tighten. He walked in without knocking, just like always. "Hey, Dad," he called out, voice bright and careless. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was—" He froze the moment he saw me at the dining table. And then he saw the papers. The entire stack. Neatly arranged. Every signature, every missed payment, every lie. His smile faltered. "Wow," he said slowly. "Looks like someone's been busy." My father stood a few feet behind me. He didn't speak. He didn't greet him. He didn't move. And that, more than anything, made Brandon's eyes flicker. He knew something was different. He knew this time the performance wouldn't work. "Sit," I said. A simple word, but one that, until that moment, I'd never spoken to him in that tone. Brandon raised an eyebrow, half amused, half irritated. "Really, Lex, what is this? Some kind of intervention?" "Sit," I repeated. Something in my voice made him comply, even if reluctantly. He pulled out the chair across from me and dropped into it with exaggerated casualness. "So," he said, folding his arms, "why don't you explain what exactly you think you've discovered?" I pushed the first page toward him. The loan. Brandon glanced at it, barely skimming. "Already told you, Lex, business risk, temporary cash flow issue, nothing to freak out about." I slid the next page toward him. The missed payments. He shrugged. "Market dipped. Happens to everyone." The foreclosure notice. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off with a sharper voice than I knew I could produce. "And here," I said, tapping the page, "is the signature you forged." Brandon's jaw tightened. "That's your signature," he said. "You probably just forgot." "I don't forget how I sign my own name," I shot back. "But you? You always signed things fast. Sloppy. Flashy. I recognize this style. It's yours." He laughed under his breath. "You're being paranoid." "You're being careless," I said. "The bank confirmed I'm the emergency contact. You listed me because you wanted someone to blame when things went wrong. You wanted someone to call instead of you." He rolled his eyes. "You're giving yourself way too much credit." My father stepped forward. "Enough." It was the first time he had spoken. The word cut the air cleanly. Brandon looked up, startled. He wasn't used to that tone from our father. No one was. "Dad," Brandon began quickly. "Listen, she's twisting everything. I told you I was handling it." "You lied to me." My father's voice didn't rise, but it deepened. Into something heavy, something old, something wounded. I watched Brandon's mouth open, then close. Because even he knew there were only a few moments in life when you understood instantly that you were standing on a cliff you'd built yourself. "This loan," my father continued, tapping the papers, You didn't tell me what it really was. You told me it was formal restructuring. You told me it was routine. I I simplified it, Brandon said weakly. You were tired. It would have taken hours to explain everything. You forged your sister's signature. Brandon blinked. A fraction of a second, but I saw it. The truth hit him like a blow he hadn't expected, because he hadn't expected our father to notice. Not him. Dad, Brandon said, switching tactics. Listen, I know it looks bad. It is bad, I said. 4 months of missed payments, Brandon. 4 months where you ignored every call. 4 months where our father's house, this house, was slipping out of his hands. Brandon slammed a hand on the table. I'll fix it. When? I demanded. When you feel like it? When some miracle contract drops into your lap? When Dad loses the house and you need somewhere to hide? My father sank slowly into the chair beside me. He looked tired, older, but clearer than he'd been in months. Brandon, he said quietly, what happened to all the money? Brandon looked from me to him. His throat moved as he swallowed. Then he leaned back, masking panic with a crooked grin. You really want to know? He asked. Fine, you want the truth? The money went into expansion just like I promised. But contracts fell through, clients backed out. I had to cover the operational gaps myself. With whose money? I asked. He didn't answer. Brandon, my father whispered, did you use company funds? Sometimes, Brandon snapped. I had to. You weren't making decisions. You were sick? My father finished. Recovering? Brandon looked away. My father's voice hardened. I'd only heard it a handful of times in my life. You told me the company was stable, he said. You told me we were growing. I told you what you wanted to hear. Brandon shouted suddenly. You couldn't handle the truth. You've always been too cautious, too slow, too afraid to take risks. That caution built this house, my father roared back. That caution paid for your education. That caution kept us afloat for 30 years. Brandon fell silent. The dining room felt smaller now, tight with everything that had gone unsaid in our family for decades. My father pressed his palms flat against the table. You had no right to use this house as collateral, he said. No right to forge your sister's name. No right to gamble with everything I worked for. Brandon's voice softened, an act he'd perfected since childhood. I was trying to help, he said. Dad, I swear, I was doing it for us. I stepped in. Then why hide everything? I asked. Why lie? Why disconnect your phone? Why let the bank call me instead of you? His eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time that night, I saw it. Fear. Not fear of losing money, not fear of losing the business, fear of being caught in the collapse of the empire he'd built on sand. Because I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed, he whispered. There it was. The truth. My father leaned back slowly, eyes glistening, not with tears, but with something worse. Disappointment. I had never seen him look at Brandon like that. And knowing my brother, neither had he. Get out, my father said quietly. Brandon's head snapped up. Dad! Get out of this house. The words were soft, steady, final. Brandon stood there, stunned. Our father had forgiven him for things I'd never even known about. He'd covered for him, believed him, defended him. But this was the line. Dad, Brandon said again, reaching out a hand. My father pulled away. You will not step foot in here until you bring every document, every account, every receipt, and explain yourself truthfully. If you lie again, once, I'm calling the authorities. Brandon swallowed. Then he turned to me, eyes blazing. This is your fault, he hissed. You've wanted to take me down your whole life. Well, congratulations, Lex. You finally did it. He waited for me to snap back, to argue, to defend myself. But I didn't. I simply held his gaze and said, I didn't take you down. You did. He flinched. Just once. Then he grabbed his jacket, stormed out, and slammed the door so hard the picture frames rattled. For a long moment, the house was silent. Then my father spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do we do now? I looked at the door Brandon had walked through. I looked at the papers on the table. And I realized we were standing on the edge of something far bigger than overdue bills and a forged signature. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about a bad decision. This was about a crime. And I was the one who was going to uncover all of it. I looked at my father. We fight back, I said. We get a lawyer. We get everything in writing. And we find out exactly what Brandon did with the money. My father nodded slowly. And after that? He asked. I met his gaze. After that, I said, we take everything back. He exhaled, a heavy, tired breath. But there was something else in it too. Relief. Because for the first time in years, someone was protecting him. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Not because I'd slept well, I hadn't slept at all, but because something inside me was no longer willing to wait. Not for another call, not for another excuse, not for Brandon's next performance. My father was still asleep when I slipped out of the house with a folder under my arm and a determination that felt sharper than fear. Today, I was going to find the rest of the truth. Because what we'd uncovered last night, that was only the surface. Brandon's lies always ran deeper. United Bank's downtown branch opened at 8. I was in the lobby at 7:55, clutching my father's documents like a shield. The young teller at the reception recognized me from yesterday's call the moment I said my name. Her expression shifted from neutral politeness to a kind of careful concern. Ms. Luachik? One moment, please. I'll call Mr. Wexler. Harold Wexler, the senior financial officer, was a man in his late 50s, with silver glasses and tired eyes. The kind of tired that comes from decades of listening to other people's financial disasters. He shook my hand firmly. Thank you for coming in, Ms. Luachik. After reviewing the situation again last night, I believe there are several things we need to discuss privately. Privately? That word echoed ominously. We sat in his glass-walled office overlooking the city. He closed the blinds before he spoke. First, I want to confirm something, he began. Your father insists that he never took this loan, and you believe the signatures may have been forged. I don't believe it, I said. I know it. He nodded gravely. That's what I feared. He turned his screen toward me. On it was a chart, 2 columns, 2 colors, pre-loan assets, post-loan withdrawals. At first glance, they looked like random spikes of numbers. Then I saw the total. Almost the entire $450,000 was gone. Transferred. Withdrawn. Moved. Piece by piece. Where did it go? I whispered. Mr. Wexler tapped a line of text on the screen. Most of it, he said, went into a company registered under your brother's name, Luachik and Drake Logistics Expansion, LLC. That's not my father's company, I said. Our family business isn't registered with any Drake. Who is that? He sighed. That's what concerns me. This LLC was created 6 weeks before the loan request. It lists 2 partners. He clicked. 2 names appeared. Brandon J. Luachik, Evan Drake. And who is Evan Drake? I asked. Your brother's business partner, he said. Or possibly something else. Something else, I repeated quietly. Like what? He folded his hands. Mr. Drake has a record. My stomach lurched. A criminal record? Yes. Fraud. Embezzlement. Bank manipulation. He was part of a group that created shell companies to siphon investor funds. Served 18 months. I stared at the screen. Brandon didn't just make a bad deal. He didn't just take a risky loan. He partnered with a known financial criminal, and he used our father's house to do it. How much did my brother lose? I asked, my voice barely steady. Mr. Wexler clicked to another graph. The line dropped like a cliff. Based on our analysis, he said, your brother lost approximately 75% of the loan within the first 6 months. Bad investments, failed contracts, a subcontractor who never existed. And then, after that, we stopped seeing legitimate business expenses. What do you mean, legitimate? I asked. He opened the next page. It listed dozens of transactions. Not for trucks, not for warehouses, not for company expansion, but for luxury hotel stays, jewelry stores, offshore transfers, cash withdrawals, high-end restaurants, and private club memberships, and buried deep in the list, a $38,000 wire to Evan Drake. My stomach turned cold. He stole it, I said. He stole money using my father's house as collateral. He funneled it into a fake expansion and then spent the rest. Mr. Wexler didn't deny it. We see this pattern often, he said gently. Someone with a failing business tries to leverage family assets to buy time. But instead of solving the problem, they dig deeper into debt. And drag everyone else down with them, I whispered. He nodded. I'm afraid there's more. He opened one final document. At the top, loan application, priority line, secured. Pending approval amount requested, $280,000 collateral, Luachik and Drake Logistics LLC assets, plus personal assets, primary, 417 Maple Ridge. Applicant, Brandon J. Luachik. Dated 3 months ago. My hands went cold. He tried to take out a second loan, I breathed, using the same collateral. It was denied, Mr. Wexler said. We flagged inconsistencies in the income statements. If it had gone through, your father's home would have been foreclosed by now. I closed my eyes. A second loan. Another risk. Another lie. Brandon hadn't just been reckless. He had been desperate, panicked. His entire image, the smart businessman, the inheritor of our father's legacy, the golden son, was collapsing, and he was willing to burn everything to keep it alive. After leaving the bank, I drove straight back to Maple Ridge. My father was waiting at the dining table with 2 cups of coffee. One for him, one for me. His hands trembled when he handed me mine. You look pale, he said quietly. What did they tell you? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I grabbed Brandon's old laptop from the cabinet where my father had carefully kept it after Brandon upgraded and left the old one behind. Brandon had always been meticulous about appearances but careless with details. He probably assumed my father wouldn't know how to unlock it. He was half right. 9-digit passcode, my father said. He never told me what it was. I know what it is, I said. Brandon always used the same password for everything personal, 09221998. The date he won his first high school football championship. The screen lit up. Desktop, folders, hundreds of files. I connected the laptop to my own, pulled up a backup program, and started a forensic sweep. I wasn't a hacker, but I wasn't clueless either. Within minutes, I found exactly what I suspected. A hidden directory. Invisible at first glance. Name, accounts separate. Separate from what? Separate from who? Inside were spreadsheets, hundreds of entries, deposits, withdrawals, transfers, and a pattern emerged quickly. Brandon hadn't simply lost money. He had been moving it. From account to account, country to country, name to name, using our father's credit. Using my forged signature, using a partner with a criminal record. My father watched me scroll, his face growing paler. Is that? He began. Yes, I said. It's all here. Where did he get that money? He whispered. I clicked open another file. A list of accounts. All under the name Luachik Holdings, private. Dad, I said quietly, these are your retirement accounts. He stared at the screen as if it were on fire. He stole from those too, I said. He drained them piece by piece. My father sank into his chair, hand covering his mouth. I trusted him, he whispered. I trusted my son. His voice broke, and something inside me broke too, because loving someone and believing in them shouldn't end with betrayal. Family wasn't supposed to end like this. But here we were, alone in a house that might not belong to us in a month, staring at numbers that proved Brandon had never cared enough to stop. I took my father's hand. "We're going to fix this," I said. "I promise." He looked at me with hollow eyes. "How?" "We do what Brandon never expected," I said. "We tell the truth. We get a lawyer. And we let the law do what it's supposed to." As I copied the last file, a notification popped up. An unread message. From an unknown email, edidolenterprise.com. Subject: Tell your father to stop asking questions. Brandon can't protect him anymore. My blood ran ice cold. The message had arrived 2 days ago. My voice came out a whisper. "Dad, this isn't just financial." He looked at me bewildered. "What do you mean?" "There's someone else involved," I said slowly. "Someone Brandon owes. Someone who knows he can't pay." My father's voice cracked. "Are we in danger?" I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth, that cold, chilling truth, settled over me in a way I couldn't ignore. Brandon didn't just destroy our finances. He brought someone dangerous into our home. Someone who knew our names, knew our address, knew we were asking questions. And if Brandon couldn't pay, they would come after whoever was left. I closed the laptop. "We need a lawyer," I said, "and we need to call the police." My father's breath shook. "Alexis?" I squeezed his hand. "We'll get through this," I said. "But Brandon isn't our problem anymore." He blinked. "Then who is?" I exhaled. Evan Drake. The lawyer we chose was not the kind of man who flinched easily. Jonathan Ellers was in his late 40s, a former federal prosecutor with a face carved into permanent skepticism, and the kind of quiet confidence that made dishonest people sweat. When he walked into a room, you could practically hear paperwork organizing itself out of fear. Exactly the kind of person we needed. He sat across from us in his office, flipping through the folder of documents I brought. Brandon's false signatures, the loan papers, the hidden accounts, the transfers to Evan Drake. By the third page, his eyebrows had pulled so tightly together that a thin line had formed between them. By the fifth, he let out a low whistle. And by the eighth, he closed the folder, leaned back in his leather chair, and said, "Your brother is in very serious trouble." My father swallowed hard. "This wasn't intentional," he said weakly. "He's not a criminal. He made mistakes, but he didn't mean—" Jonathan raised a hand. "Mr. Lewichik, I need you to hear this clearly." He tapped the folder. "These are criminal acts. Multiple counts, fraud, identity forgery, misappropriation of secured assets. And if this Evan Drake is who the records say he is, then your son may also be involved in a felony-level financial scheme." My father closed his eyes. The man who had built a company from nothing now sat slumped like someone had stolen gravity from him. I reached for his hand under the table. Ellers continued, his voice steady, factual, merciless. "Your son did not simply make bad choices. He lied to a financial institution. He altered signatures, and he leveraged property he did not own. A bank could press charges. You could press charges." My father's mouth trembled. I don't want him in prison." Ellers nodded. "Then we need to act. Before the bank or Mr. Drake act for you, we'll begin by documenting every instance of fraud. Then we'll negotiate with the bank to buy time. And then, only then, we decide how to handle your son." I nodded. "We already know Drake threatened us." Ellers paused. "Threatened you?" "An email," I said. 2 days ago, telling us to stop asking questions because Brandon can't protect us anymore." His expression sharpened instantly. "Did you forward it to me?" he asked. "I have it saved," I said. "Good. You're going to keep any communication he sends. And from this moment on, neither of you are to be alone at the house." My father stiffened. Is he dangerous?" Ellers hesitated. A beat too long. Then he spoke carefully, deliberately. "Mr. Luachik, men like Evan Drake don't send warnings unless they intend to back them up. By the time we left the lawyer's office, the sun had set. The air outside was cold and still, with that heavy quiet that makes your instincts sharpen. We crossed the parking lot toward my car. That's when I saw it. A black sedan, engine running, tinted windows, parked exactly facing where we were. Something about the car made the hairs on my arms lift. Too still, too deliberate. My father didn't notice. He was too lost in the weight of what we had just learned. But I noticed. And the moment my eyes fixed on the sedan, the driver's window rolled down, just an inch. Not enough to reveal a face, but enough to reveal intention. Enough to show me we were being watched. I froze. "Dad," I whispered. "Get in the car." He blinked. "What?" "Get in. Now." He hesitated, confused, but he moved. As soon as he was in the passenger seat, I circled the car, keeping my eyes on the sedan. The engine hummed. Steady, low, waiting. I slid behind the wheel, locked the doors. The sedan didn't move. He was waiting for something, or someone. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to keep my voice steady. "Dad," I said, "look at me." He turned slowly. "That's him," I whispered. "I think that's Drake." His face drained of color. The sedan door clicked. A silhouette shifted inside. My chest tightened. Then, the sedan pulled out of the lot. Slowly. Smoothly. But not away. It pulled out directly behind us, following us out. My father grabbed the handle above the window. "Alexis, I see him." I pulled onto the road. The sedan stayed 2 car lengths behind. Every turn I made, he made too. Slow, measured, not chasing, not hiding, shadowing, watching, assessing. I turned right. He turned right. I switched lanes. He switched lanes. A cold realization sank into my bones. He wasn't following us to scare us. He was following us because he wanted to know where we lived, where we slept, where my father, an old man recovering from illness, was vulnerable. That was the moment something inside me shifted from fear to fury. "You want to see where we live?" I whispered under my breath. "Not tonight." I hit the gas. Hard. The tires screeched, and the sudden burst threw my father back in his seat. "Lex!" I didn't answer. I took a hard left onto a one-way street, another sharp right into a narrow alley, and then another left onto an access road. The sedan tried to follow, but I'd already lost him. The moment we reached the main road again, I hit the brakes and pulled into a grocery store lot. The sedan didn't reappear. Not for a minute, not for 5, not for 10. He was gone. For now. My father sat trembling beside me. "Alexis," he whispered, "what have we gotten ourselves into?" My hands tightened on the wheel. "Nothing," I said. "He dragged us into this. Now we're dragging ourselves out." When we got home, the house felt colder. Too quiet. Like the walls were listening. I locked every window, every door. Checked the back entrance twice. Turned on every light. My father sank into a chair, exhausted. I pulled out my phone to call Ellers. He needed to know Drake had followed us. But before I could dial, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something twisted in my gut. I answered, and a calm, smooth male voice said, "You're smarter than your brother." My blood went ice cold. The man continued, deliberate and unhurried. "Tell your father not to make this harder than it needs to be." I swallowed. "Who is this?" A soft chuckle. "You know exactly who I am." I did. Evan Drake. The man who took the money. The man who ruined Brandon. The man who tried to scare us into silence. "I'm calling the police," I said. He ignored me. "I want my investment back," he said. Your brother owes me, and if he can't pay, someone else will. My fists clenched. We don't have your money. I know, he said lightly, but you have something else. I froze. What? Collateral. The word dropped into the silence like a knife, and then he hung up. I stood motionless for several seconds, phone still pressed to my ear, until my father's voice pulled me back. Alexis, he whispered. What did he say? I turned slowly, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I lied to him. Nothing we can't handle. But inside, something hardened. We weren't just fighting a foreclosure. We weren't just fighting Brandon's lies. We were fighting a man who believed our lives were collateral. And I had already decided I was not going to let Evan Drake collect. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. I kept replaying Drake's voice in my head. Smooth, calm, almost bored, like threatening families was nothing more than brushing lint off his suit jacket. My father sat in the living room with a blanket around his shoulders, pretending to read, but I could see the tremor in his hands every time he turned a page he wasn't actually reading. The house felt smaller, walls closer, shadows longer, and somewhere out there, maybe across town, maybe 2 streets away, was a man who thought we owed him something, who thought we were leverage, who thought he could get away with all of it. I promised myself he wouldn't. I waited until morning to call the police. I played Drake's voicemail, the smooth threat, the unapologetic warning. The officer took notes, asked questions, nodded sympathetically, then said exactly what I feared. Ma'am, I understand your concern, but this voicemail isn't a direct threat. I blinked. He said we'd pay for my brother's debt. Yes, the officer agreed. But he didn't explicitly threaten physical harm. It's vague. It's intimidation, I said sharply. It's concerning, he corrected gently. But without a physical incident, trespassing, or a more explicit message, there isn't much we can do at this stage. My father's face fell. So we just wait until he hurts someone? The officer sighed. I recommend installing exterior cameras, improving locks, and documenting everything. If anything escalates, call us immediately. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I thanked him, closed the door, and realized something chilling. We were on our own. At noon, Brandon finally showed up. Not because he cared, not because he wanted to fix anything. No, Brandon showed up because Evan Drake had called him too. I knew it the second I opened the door and saw the panic in his eyes. The panic he tried to hide behind his usual swagger, but it bled through anyway, twitching at the corner of his jaw. "Where's Dad?" he demanded, pushing past me. "In the living room," I said coldly. "Where were you last night?" He ignored the question. He stormed into the room, chest puffed up, trying to appear in control. "Dad?" he said quickly. "You can't listen to Alexis. She's making things worse. I have it under control." "That's a lie," I said. Brandon whirled around. "Shut up." And that was new. He'd belittled me before, rolled his eyes, dismissed me, mocked me, but he had never told me to shut up in front of our father. My father slowly stood, leaning slightly on his cane. "You spoke to Drake?" he said quietly. Brandon's face drained of color. I don't know who that is." "You're lying," my father said. Just like that. No yelling, no trembling. Only truth. The air shifted. Brandon's shoulders slumped. "He called me," he admitted, voice raw. "He said he'd come after me if I didn't pay." "He followed us last night," I said. "He knows where we live." Brandon flinched. "What?" he whispered. "You brought him into our lives," I said. "You let him into this house without ever opening the door." My father moved closer, his voice low. "How much do you owe him?" Brandon swallowed. Not that much." "How much?" 200,000, Brandon whispered. My father inhaled sharply. "And you thought you could pay him with what? Another loan? My savings, my house?" Brandon's silence was an answer. For years, I imagined that if Brandon was ever cornered, he'd get angry, shout, blame me, blame Dad, blame the universe. But that wasn't what happened. Brandon sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he said. Drake told me it was a sure thing, that the returns would be massive, that we'd all be rich. I thought I could fix everything before anyone noticed. My father closed his eyes. You were stealing from me, he said quietly. From your own family. I thought I'd pay it back. You thought wrong. The shame on Brandon's face lasted only seconds before something uglier replaced it. He looked at me, wildly, desperately. This is your fault too, he said. If you'd helped with the business, if you'd been around more, I wouldn't have had to handle everything alone. I laughed. Short, sharp, cold. You didn't handle anything? I said. You buried us. Brandon jumped to his feet. You're enjoying this, aren't you, seeing me fail? No, I said softly. I'm watching you destroy yourself. There's a difference. My father stepped between us. Enough. Both of you. We stood in tense silence. Brandon rubbed his face, pacing. Then he froze. Drake said he wants his money this week, he whispered. If I don't get it, I don't know what he'll do, I crossed my arms. Why not ask him? Brandon glared. And then, with a trembling voice, he said the thing that made everything inside me sharpen. He said if I don't pay, he'll come after the house. After Dad. After you. My stomach dropped. My father's breath caught. Brandon looked at me with tears in his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, but pure fear. He said if I don't pay, Brandon whispered, he'll take what's valuable. My father's hand tightened on the back of a chair. And what? He asked quietly. Does he think is valuable? Brandon didn't answer. He didn't have to. We all understood. And that was the moment I realized Drake wasn't just dangerous. He wasn't just manipulative. He was capable of anything. And he thought we were leverage, collateral, targets. My father sat down slowly, breathing heavily. I rushed to support him. Brandon backed away like a child who had broken a window. Dad, I whispered. Are you okay? He nodded weakly. I never told you something, he said. Both of you. Brandon frowned. What? What now? My father took a shaky breath. That house, he said. This house isn't just a home, it's the last thing your mother left behind. I froze. What? I whispered. Brandon's eyes widened. She made me promise, my father continued, voice wavering. Promise that the house would go to you, Alexis. Not Brandon. You. The room went still. I stared at him, stunned. Brandon stared too, then shook his head violently. No, she wouldn't do that. I'm the eldest. Dad's successor. The house. Your mother, my father said firmly, believed you'd always have opportunities, that you'd always land on your feet, that life would hand you chances. He turned to me. But she worried you'd be overlooked, that you'd never be given what you deserved. My throat closed. She asked me, my father whispered, to leave the house to you. And I agreed. Brandon's face twisted. That's a lie. No, my father said. It isn't. Brandon's voice cracked. You were going to give her the house? Over me? It isn't about you, my father said gently. It's about her, and her mother, and her grandmother. This house is part of that line. Brandon was shaking now, not with grief, but with fury. You're siding with her, he said hoarsely. You're both turning against me. I stepped forward. No, I said. You turned against us when you put this house on the line without caring what it meant. Brandon's face twisted with rage and shame, and something close to madness. He grabbed his coat. I'll fix this, he snapped. I'll get the money. I'll get Drake off our backs. How? I demanded. But he was already at the door. He turned back once, eyes burning. This isn't over, he said. And then he was gone. My father stared at the empty doorway. He's in danger, he whispered. Yes, I said. He is. So are we. I nodded. Yes. Then something colder, sharper settled inside me. But Drake made one mistake. My father looked at me weakly. What mistake? He thinks we're weak. I picked up the folder of evidence. Every signature, every transfer, every crime. And he thinks Brandon is the only one worth threatening. I closed the folder. He has no idea who he just picked a fight with. Brandon disappeared for 2 days. Not answering calls. Not responding to messages. Not showing up at home or at any of the places he used to frequent. And for the first time in my life, I didn't chase him. I didn't try to fix what he broke. I didn't try to protect him from the consequences he'd brought on himself. Instead, I protected my father. We installed cameras. We filed formal reports. We sent all evidence to Ellers, who drafted an emergency injunction preventing any sale, loan, or transfer connected to my father's property. Drake couldn't legally touch the house anymore. On the third day, Ellers called, Alexis, we found something. He sent a scanned file, one more hidden document from the laptop. It showed that Brandon didn't just forge my signature. He forged my father's on the transfer of ownership documents, attempting to quietly move the house into an LLC controlled by Drake. If the bank hadn't denied the second loan, if I hadn't picked up the phone that day, if I hadn't pushed, we wouldn't have owned our own home anymore. That was the moment I stopped seeing Brandon as a brother and started seeing him as someone we needed to survive. Brandon returned on the fourth night. He didn't knock. He stumbled into the house like a storm that had lost direction, wet, shaking, eyes hollow. My father stood at the doorway, cane in hand. I stepped beside him. Brandon looked at us as if seeing strangers. He wants the money, he choked out. He wants more. I told him I didn't have it. And he wiped his face with unsteady hands. He said he'd come after you next, Dad. And Alexis, he knows where you work. My father straightened. You brought this man into our lives. Brandon broke. I didn't know who he was. I thought he was just a businessman. I thought it would work. You thought of yourself, I said quietly. He went silent, and something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not denial, but a painful, heavy recognition of the truth. My father exhaled. Son, I love you, but you have to take responsibility for this. You have to tell the police everything. You have to cooperate with our lawyer. And you have to accept whatever comes next. Brandon's eyes filled. You'd let them arrest me? My father's voice was steady. I won't stop them. Brandon turned to me. And you'll let them take me? I looked him straight in the eyes. You tried to give Drake the house Mom left for me. You forged my name. You stole Dad's retirement. You brought danger here. You made choices, Brandon. Now you live with them. He stared at me. Then he nodded once, broken, small, but real. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll tell them everything. Ellers arranged a meeting with the police and federal investigators. Brandon spilled everything. Every loan, every forged signature, every transfer, every offshore account, every message from Drake. It took 4 hours. And when it was over, Brandon wasn't allowed to come home with us. He left the station with officers, calm, resigned, finally understanding that fear wasn't going to save him. But the biggest shock came a week later. Drake was arrested first. Turns out he'd been on the FBI's radar for months. Brandon's testimony was the missing piece, enough to trigger warrants, raids, and charges far larger than anything tied to our case. He was taken in without incident. Just another man in a suit whose arrogance finally outgrew his power. Ellers called me that afternoon. It's done, he said. Drake won't bother your family ever again. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I'd been holding for weeks. Brandon pled guilty. He took a deal. Fraud, forgery, misappropriation. He avoided years of prison by cooperating fully, by naming every person connected to Drake, by giving investigators access to everything. He received a suspended sentence, mandatory restitution, and 5 years of supervised probation. When he hugged my father goodbye outside the courthouse, I didn't step forward. He didn't expect me to. We weren't enemies, but we weren't siblings either, not anymore. Some things break without exploding. They just quietly stop being whole. He left the city a month later, moved to a small town upstate to work at a mechanic shop. A simple job, a quiet life, a chance to start over away from temptation. I wished him peace, but I didn't wish him home. The foreclosure was reversed. All fraudulent debt was erased. Every account Brandon drained was restored by asset recovery teams handling Drake's case. My father cried when he saw the paperwork. Not from relief, from gratitude, and from finally knowing I wasn't the daughter who needed protection. I was the one who protected him. We restored the house, repainted the shutters, fixed the porch steps, planted flowers for my mother, and one evening, as we sat on the porch drinking coffee, my father turned to me. "Alexis," he said softly, "your mother was right." I smiled. "About what?" "You're the one who saves this family." I didn't correct him, didn't say that I hadn't saved the family, just him and myself. Brandon would have to save himself, somewhere far away. Weeks later, as I walked through the quiet house, I found one last envelope in Brandon's handwriting. Inside, a single sentence. "I'm sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me." I folded it carefully, put it in a drawer, and whispered, "Maybe someday." But not today. Today I stepped outside, breathed the crisp air, and felt something I hadn't felt since the day the bank called me by mistake. Or what I thought was a mistake. Strength, clarity, the sense of being exactly where I belonged. And as I looked at the home my mother left me, I understood. The bank called the right person. The universe called the right person. Because this story wasn't about the brother who broke everything. It was about the daughter who finally put it back together.